The call didn't connect. She tried again, then again. It still wasn't reachable. Her mind raced as she struggled to make sense of what was happening. Femi was the only one who had the spare key to her apartment, but he wouldn't. He couldn't do this to her, would he? She thought. Tolani was at 33 years old. The stress of balancing her demanding banking job and a relationship that felt more like a weight than a blessing had taken its toll. Tonight, she sat on her mother's couch in the small apartment she had worked tirelessly to maintain. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Her phone lay on the armrest and the screen blank. She had called Femi, her boyfriend of 7 years, hours ago. He promised to call her back, but that promise hung in the air like a broken clock that no longer ticked. Her mind wandered to the beginning of their relationship. Femi had been charming, attentive, and full of dreams. He had promised her the world back then, painting vivid pictures of their future together, a house in Lekki, 2 kids, many vacations to Dubai, even spoke of naming their baby Tola just after Tolani. But now those promises seemed like faded graffiti on a crumbling wall. 2 years ago, he had proposed to her in front of her friends, and for a moment, she felt all the waiting had been worth it. Yet, 2 years later, there was still no wedding date, and now it's been 7 years in total. Her chest tightened as she whispered to herself, maybe I'm asking for too much. Kaima, her best friend since their university days at Unilag, had come over, uninvited as usual. Kaima was everything Tolani wasn't, outspoken, bold, and fiercely independent. She dropped her purse on the table with a dramatic sigh and fixed her gaze on Tolani. Tolani, you are doing this again, Abi? Kaima began, folding her arms. Tolani glanced at her. Doing what? Making excuses for Femi. Kaima snapped. I saw your face when you checked your phone for the 10th time tonight. Don't tell me you're still waiting for his call. Tolani looked away. He said he was busy. Busy with what, Tolani? You're 33, 7 years of your life with this guy, and he's still not serious. Leave him. Kaima's voice was sharp, but carried the weight of her concern. I can't, Tolani replied, her voice trembling. Who will want me at this age? I can't start all over. Kaima let out a frustrated sigh and sat down beside her. That's your fear talking. You think 33 is the end of the road? There are women who start over at 40 and still find happiness. Femi, as long as I am concerned, doesn't deserve you. He does not respect you. He cheats, he lies, and now he's delaying marriage. What are you even holding on to? Tolani blinked back tears, unwilling to meet Kaima's gaze. It's not that simple. 7 years is a long time, Kaima. I've invested too much to just walk away like that. Invested in what? You've only invested in pain and humiliation. Kaima's voice softened as she placed a hand on Tolani's shoulders. I am not saying it to be easy, babe. But you deserve better. Don't let fear keep you trapped. Tolani wanted to believe her, but fear grips her heart like a vice. She had endured Femi's infidelities, his blatant lies, and his financial struggles. He had borrowed money from her countless times, always with promises to pay it back. The promises never materialized, but she let it slide every single time. Deep down, she knew she stayed out of fear of starting over, fear of being alone, fear that no one else would choose her. She had convinced herself that love was about endurance, about sticking it out no matter what. But as Kaima's words echoed in her mind, she wondered if endurance was really enough. It had been a long day at the bank, and Tolani was looking forward to relaxing at home. As she parked her car in the compound and approached her front door, A strange feeling washed over her. Something was off. The door was locked as usual, but the quietness in the air felt so heavy. Unlocking the door and stepping inside, her heart dropped. The living room was stripped bare. The couch, the television, the small rug she had bought during a Christmas sale, all gone. She dashed into the kitchen, the fridge, her microwave, her pots, everything was gone. She ran into the bedroom, hoping that at least her personal belongings had been spared, but it was the same story. Her wardrobe was wide open, empty hangers swinging in mockery. Her savings, the little stash of cash she had hidden at the back of the wardrobe, were all missing too. Her legs gave way and she collapsed on the floor. What? What is this? She whispered, her voice breaking. She grabbed her phone with trembling hands and dialed Femi's number. The call didn't connect. She tried again, then again. It still wasn't reachable. Her mind raced as she struggled to make sense of what was happening. Femi was the only one who had the spare key to her apartment, but he wouldn't. He couldn't do this to her, would he? She thought. A soft knock on the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She stumbled to her feet and opened it to find one of her neighbors, an older woman with a kind eye, standing there. "Auntie T," the woman began hesitantly. "Are you okay?" Tolani shook her head. "I don't know what's going on. My house, it's completely empty." The neighbor looked at her with pity. "Ah, Auntie T, I saw Femi earlier today. He came with some men carrying out your things. I thought maybe you were moving out." Tolani felt like the ground beneath her had disappeared. "No, Femi wouldn't do that. He wouldn't." But the look on her neighbor's face told her otherwise. Her phone fell from her hand as the weight of the betrayal crashed over her. The man she had sacrificed so much for, the man she had forgiven time and time again, had stolen every single thing from her. She sat on the floor numb until the sound of Kaima's car honking outside jolted her back to reality. Kaima burst into the house moments later, her eyes widening as she took in the empty space. "Tolani, what happened here?" Through tears, Tolani managed to recount the neighbor's words. Kaima's face turned red with anger. "That bastard. I've always knew he was no good. But this is just so unforgivable." She crouched beside her friend and held her hands tightly. "This is it, Tolani. You have to let him go now. No excuses. He's done nothing but use you." Tolani sobbed, her voice barely a whisper. "I gave him everything, Kaima. My money, my time, my body, my heart, everything. How could he do this to me?" Kaima hugged her tightly. "You will get through this, I promise. But you need to let him go. This time for good." The next few days were a blur of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Tolani reported the incident to the police, but there wasn't much they could do. She knew Femi was gone, but a part of her still held on to a tiny thread of hope that it was all a misunderstanding. That thread snapped when a mutual friend mentioned seeing Femi in Port Harcourt. He had relocated with one of his girlfriends. Tolani sat on Kaima's couch, staring blankly at the wall. So this is it. 7 years, and he's gone just like that, with everything I have ever worked for. Kaima shook her head, her voice firm. "Not everything, Tolani. He didn't take your strength. He didn't take your heart or your future. You will rebuild, I promise, and this time, no more Femi." But as much as Tolani wanted to believe her friend, the pain of betrayal felt too deep to overcome. Sunday mornings were becoming the highlight of Tolani's week, not because of the sermons or the hymns, but because of the peace they brought. After everything she had endured with Femi, church was her sanctuary, a place to escape her thoughts, even if just for a little while. On that particular Sunday, Tolani and Kaima lingered outside after the service, chatting about the week ahead. The sun was bright but not oppressive, and the cheerful hum of other church members filled the air. "Tolani, you need to stop wearing these dull colors," Kaima teased, tugging at Tolani's plain grey dress. "You look like a retired school teacher." Tolani smiled faintly. "I'm not trying to impress anyone, Kaima, just let me be." Before Kaima could respond, a shadow fell over them. They looked up to see a man with a warm, confident smile standing before them. He was dressed sharply in a crisp white shirt and dark slacks. "Good afternoon, ladies," he said, his deep voice commanding attention. "I am Chidi Okwara. I couldn't help but notice you both during service. I'd like to get to know you." Tolani raised an eyebrow and folded her arms. "Thanks, I am not interested." Her tone was curt, almost dismissive. Kaima, ever the diplomat, stepped in with a laugh. "Don't mind her, Chidi. She's just cautious. I'm Kaima and she's Tolani." Tolani shot her a warning glance, but Kaima ignored. Chidi didn't seem deterred by Tolani's attitude. His smile remained intact as he nodded politely. "I understand. I'll see you ladies next Sunday then," he said. As he walked away, Kaima turned to Tolani, an incredulous look on her face. "Tolani, what was that? The man just said hello and you acted like he asked for your bank pin." Tolani sighed and rubbed her arms. "Kaima, I'm not doing this. Not after Femi, please." Kaima shook her head. "Tolani, not every man is like Femi. You can't let one bad experience close every door. At least let him talk to you. There is no harm in that. Just a chat." Tolani stared at the bustling crowd of churchgoers around them. "I am not ready," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of sadness and determination. Kaima gave her a knowing look but didn't press further. She knew her friend needed time. However, Chidi was not the type to give up easily. The following Sunday, he was there again, waiting outside after service. This time, he greeted them with a simple "Good morning, ladies." Tolani muttered a reluctant "good morning" in return, while Kaima greeted him cheerfully. He didn't push for a conversation, but stayed nearby, making small talk with others until it was time to leave. This pattern repeated for weeks. Each Sunday, Chidi would show up, greet them politely, and make light conversation. Slowly, Tolani's coldness began to thaw. "He is consistent," Kaima observed one afternoon as they sat together in Kaima's kitchen, sipping Zobo drink. "That's something Femi never was." Tolani shrugged. "Consistency doesn't mean much. For all we know, he could be just like Femi, but better at hiding it." Kaima leaned forward, her eyes serious. "Tolani, you can't live your life expecting every man to be like Femi. Chidi hasn't done anything wrong. At least give him a chance to be your friend." Tolani sighed. "Friendship is fine. Friendship is fine, but Kaima, that's all it will ever be. I'm not ready for anything serious." Kaima didn't argue. She simply smiled and changed the subject. But deep down, she hoped Tolani would open her heart again. For now, though, Tolani was determined to keep her guard up. Weeks passed, and finally, Tolani decided to share her number with Chidi. And before she knew it, she found herself chatting more and more with him. It was a quiet evening when Tolani's phone buzzed. She had just settled into her couch with a cup of tea, ready to lose herself in a novel. The name Chidi flashed on the screen. She stared at it for a moment before picking up. "Hello?" she said cautiously. "Good evening, Tolani." Chidi's voice came through, warm and cheerful. "How was your day?" he asked. "It was fine," she replied, trying to sound neutral. "That's good to hear. I was wondering, would you like to have dinner with me? Sometime this week. Just dinner, no pressure." Tolani hesitated, her mind racing. It had been weeks of polite greetings and casual chats. He seemed genuine, but after Femi, she wasn't sure she could trust her judgment. "Tolani," Chidi's voice broke her thoughts. She took a deep breath. "Okay," she said finally. "Just dinner, please." Chidi chuckled softly. "Perfect. I'll text you all the details." As the call ended, Tolani felt a pang of anxiety. What was she getting herself into? Dinner was scheduled for Friday evening at a cozy restaurant tucked away in the quiet corner of town. Kaima insisted on helping Tolani pick an outfit, much to her annoyance. "You can't just wear another boring dress," Kaima teased. "This is your first real date. Your first real outing in years. Please, let's make it count, Joe." "Kaima, it's not a date," Tolani protested. Kaima rolled her eyes. "Fine, it's not a date, but it should still look good." In the end, they settled for a simple dress that hugged Tolani's figure modestly. She paired it with a minimal jewelry and heels. At the restaurant, Chidi was waiting by the entrance, dressed in a neatly pressed shirt and dark trousers. He smiled as he saw her, his eyes lighting up. "You look really beautiful," he said as he held the door open for her. "Thank you," she mumbled, feeling slightly awkward. The dinner was nothing like what she had expected. There were no awkward silences or pretentious small talk. Instead, Chidi kept the conversation light and engaging, asking her about her interests, work, and favorite books. For the first time in years, Tolani felt relaxed in a man's presence. By the time dessert arrived, she found herself laughing at one of his stories about a disastrous attempt to bake a cake for his niece. "You are good at this," she admitted reluctantly. "At what?" he asked, genuinely curious. "At making people comfortable," she said softly. Chidi smiled. "It's not hard when you're with someone you really want to know better." "Please, Tolani, give me a chance to know you better. I want to know you beyond friendship." His words lingered in her mind long after dinner ended, and he dropped her off at home. Over the next few weeks, Tolani and Chidi grew closer, and she decided to give him a chance. Their interactions were easy and unforced, and Chidi never pressured her for more than she was ready to give. He seemed so content just being in her company, and that alone was novelty for Tolani. Kaima the observer was quick to point it out. "T, he is different," she said one evening as they chatted in her kitchen. "He is patient, he is kind. That's a really good start. I'm happy for you both." Tolani sighed, stirring her tea. "I don't know, Kaima. I know I want this, but I still feel scared. What if it's all too good to be true?" Kaima leaned forward. "You will never know unless you try, and I'm glad you're taking the step already. Not every man is Femi. You need to understand this. Don't let his mistakes keep you from finding happiness." Tolani nodded but remained silent, her thoughts swirling. Chidi was everything she had ever wanted in a partner. Gentle, attentive, and consistent. But the scars from her past refused to fade easily. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, one question replayed in her mind. Was she ready to go further with this step that she had just taken? The idea came to Tolani on a whim. Chidi had mentioned how stressful his week had been during one of their conversations, so she thought surprising him with lunch would be a thoughtful gesture. It was a sunny Thursday afternoon, when she arrived at his office building, carrying a neatly packed bag of homemade jollof rice and grilled chicken. The receptionist greeted her with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, ma. Are you here to see someone?" "Yes, please. I'm here to see Chidi Okwara," she said confidently, brushing down her dress. The receptionist pointed her towards the waiting area. "Please have a seat. He'll be with you shortly." Tolani sat down, glancing around the office. It was a modest space, bustling with activity. People moved about, engrossed in work, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride for Chidi's professionalism. But then, her eyes landed on a familiar figure, seated at one of the desks. Her heart stopped. The man turned slightly, and her breath hitched. It was Femi. She froze, her mind racing. What in God's name was he doing here? Why was he working in Chidi's office? "Femi," she whispered, her voice barely audible. At the sound of her voice, Femi looked up. His expression shifted from confusion to shock. "Tolani." The room seemed to shrink around her. Memories of the betrayal, the lies, and the heartbreak flooded in her mind. She wanted to turn and run, but her feet couldn't move. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. Before Femi could answer, Chidi appeared from the hallway, holding a folder. He stopped in his tracks when he saw Tolani's pale face. "Tolani," Chidi said, concern etched on his face. She turned to him, her voice breaking. "Chidi, what is this? You knew him, and you didn't tell me." Chidi's eyes darted between Tolani and Femi. "Wait, T, wait, let me explain." But Tolani didn't wait. Her emotions boiled over, and she stormed out of the office, ignoring Chidi's calls to stop. Back in her apartment, Tolani paced the living room, her thoughts spiraling. How could Chidi not have told her about Femi? Had he known all along? Was this some cruel joke? Kaima arrived a short while later, her face filled with concern. "T, what happened? You sounded hysterical on the phone." Tolani sat down heavily on the couch, burying her face in her hands. "Kaima, you won't believe it. Femi works in Chidi's office. I saw him there today." Kaima's eyes widened. "Femi, as in your Femi?" "I thought they saw him in Port Harcourt. I thought he had relocated." Tolani nodded, her voice breaking, and Chidi didn't say anything. He acted like he didn't know, and I don't understand what's going on. Kaima sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "T, maybe Chidi didn't know it was the same Femi. Offices are big. People don't always connect the dots." Tolani shook her head. "I can't trust him now. How can I? This is just too much. What have I gotten myself into again?" Kaima sighed. "T, you've been through a lot, and I understand why this is hard for you. But jumping into conclusions wouldn't help. Just hear him out. Talk to him." Tolani looked up at her friend, tears brimming in her eyes. What if he's been lying to me, Kaima? What if everything was a lie? Kaima gave her a small sad smile. The only way to know is to let him explain. Don't let your past with Femi ruin something this good. But Tolani wasn't ready to listen. The sight of Femi sitting there like nothing had happened, and the thought that Chidi might have hidden this from her, it was all too much. She wasn't sure she could face either of them again. It was a quiet December morning. Tolani packed her bags and left Lagos for Ibadan. The noisy city had become unbearable, and her emotions were a tangled mess. She couldn't untangle alone. Her aunt, Mama Fumi, lived in a modest house in the quiet neighborhood in Ibadan. It was a place Tolani had always associated with peace and clarity. Mama Fumi was a soft-spoken woman with streaks of grey in her hair. She welcomed Tolani with a warm hug and immediately began fussing over her. "Tolani, you've lost weight," Mama Fumi said, eyeing her knees with concern. "Sit down, let me make you some pepper soup." Later that evening, as they sat in the living room, Tolani poured out her heart. The words tumbled out in a rush. Her heartbreak with Femi, the strange coincidence with Chidi, and how everything has spiraled out of control. I feel like a fool, Tolani admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. I trusted Chidi, and now it feels like history is repeating itself. Mama Fumi listened. Her hands clasped together. When Tolani finally stopped, her aunt spoke with a calm authority. My darling, life will always test you. Sometimes, the people we blame are not the real problem. You say Chidi betrayed you, but have you allowed him to explain himself? Tolani hesitated. No, but... Mama Fumi raised her hand to stop her. No but. A good relationship needs trust, and trust requires communication. Don't let your past pain block your future blessings. Meanwhile, Kaima was back in Lagos, working on her own plan. She couldn't stand seeing her friend so broken. Chidi had called her repeatedly, desperate to explain his side of the story, and Kaima decided to intervene. This is above my pay grade, Kaima muttered to herself as she dialed Chidi's number. Chidi, pack your bags, she said firmly. When he picked up, we are going to Ibadan. Tolani needs to hear the truth, and I'm not taking no for an answer. Chidi agreed without hesitation. The following Saturday, Tolani sat in the kitchen helping Mama Fumi peel yams when Kaima's loud voice broke through the serene atmosphere. We are here, Kaima announced, barging into the house with Chidi trailing behind her. Tolani dropped the knife she was holding, her eyes wide with disbelief. Kaima, what are you doing? You're going to sit down to listen to this man, Kaima said, dragging her into the living room. No running away this time. Tolani reluctantly sat on the edge of the couch, her arms crossed defensively. Chidi looked nervous but determined. Tolani, first of all, I am sorry for how everything turned out, but I swear to you, I didn't know Femi was the same man you were talking about. When I met him, he introduced himself to me as Pius, and he is just an errand boy at the office. I only hired him because he said his girlfriend defrauded him and he needed a fresh start. Tolani's eyes widened in shock. Femi, an errand boy? Are you serious? Chidi nodded. Yes, I didn't even connect the dots until you stormed out of the office. That was when I realized the truth, and I had to question him. I would never knowingly hurt you, Tolani. You mean so much to me. The room fell silent as Tolani processed his words. The image of Femi, who had once been so confident and manipulative, reduced to running errands for others, was hard to reconcile. So, the scammer has now been scammed? Mama Fumi cleared her throat. Tolani, it seems the truth isn't what you thought it was. What will you do now? Tolani didn't answer immediately. Her emotions were still raw, but a tiny flicker of something, maybe hope, began to ignite in her chest. That night, she apologized to Chidi for having doubted him. Chidi said it was fine, considering what she had been through in the past. The Harmattan breeze was crisp, carrying with it the festive energy of Christmas. The soft glow of sunlight filtered through the curtains. As Tolani stayed awake, the sound of distant laughter drifted into her room, accompanied by the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread and spiced chicken. She stretched lazily and smiled, grateful for the peace she had found in Ibadan. Living with Mama Fumi had been a blessing, a time to heal, reflect and rediscover herself. She slipped into a pair of slippers and headed to the living room where the sound of voices grew louder. As she stepped into the room, Tolani froze. There, amidst the twinkling Christmas decoration and cheerful chatter, was Chidi. He was dressed sharply, his smile warm and inviting. Beside him, Kaima and Mama Fumi were grinding mischievously. But what made Tolani's breath catch was Chidi kneeling on one knee, holding a small velvet box in his hand. Chidi, what's going on? Tolani asked, her voice shaky, her heart pounding in her chest. The room fell silent as Chidi began to speak. His voice was steady, filled with emotions. Tolani, you're the most amazing woman I've ever met. You've taught me what it means to love someone deeply and selflessly. I've seen your strength, your kindness and your resilience, and every day I wake up grateful that you are in my life. Tolani's eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling. I know your past has been hard, and I know it hasn't been easy for you to trust again, Chidi continued, his voice breaking slightly. But I promise to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice with me. Tolani Adegbite, please be my wife. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. The Christmas lights twinkled behind them, casting a magical glow over the scene. Mama Fumi dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, and Kaima could barely contain her excitement. Tolani's lips trembled as tears slid down her cheeks. Slowly she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Chidi, I'll marry you. Cheers erupted the room as Chidi slipped the beautiful ring onto her finger. Kaima pulled her into a tight hug, laughing and crying at the same time. Mama Fumi clapped her hands, murmuring prayers of thanksgiving. Chidi rose to his feet and wrapped Tolani in a warm embrace. Thank you for saying yes to me, he whispered. Tolani rested her head against his chest, a sense of peace and joy washing over her. This was it. This was what she had been searching for all along. Not perfection, but love that was patient, kind, and true. As they sat down to a feast prepared by Mama Fumi, Tolani realized that this was the best Christmas gift she had ever received. She glanced at the sparkling ring on her finger and then at the man who had given her his heart. She no longer feared her past or the pain it carried. Instead, she embraced the love and happiness of her present. For the first time in years, she felt whole. She looked at Chidi and smiled. I'm happy to do life with you. The moral of this story is that true love is about respect, consistency, and mutual support, not endurance or settling for less. Tolani's journey teaches us the importance of valuing oneself, letting go of toxic relationships, and embracing second chances. Healing takes time, but with patience and the right people, love can be rediscovered. Trusting again requires courage, but it can lead to a life filled with joy and fulfillment. Thank you so much for watching this fantastic story on African Stories by Tiana. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing stories. See you next time.